Imagine you're looking through it and you see your dream job and you apply, You're like, hey, I've been looking for this job for a while. It looks nice. You come back the next day or even an hour later and it says reviewed and declined. People think, hey, you still reviewed it, right? It couldn't have been a bot. How would you feel if it wasn't even a human who would read that? It was an algorithm. Yeah, right? Today I'm going to talk about why algorithms and job hiring platforms should be regulated. As someone recently got their job after dealing with this for like the past 3-4 months, I personally have interest in this topic. Many companies rely on these hiring algorithms because they get too many resumes, but these algorithms are very poorly regulated and extremely discriminatory. Today I'm going to talk about the problems, causes, and the solutions for these hiring algorithms. These algorithms discriminate against job seekers and are biased on who it chooses. They're very inefficient regardless of what company believe. One journalist, Hilke Schellman, did an investigation that told us many things about these algorithms. At one point, she only replied in German and still got an interview. Isn't that crazy? Even like if you don't use English, just because they have an automatic translator, they'll read it as English anyways. So you can be like, say you're Hispanic. You don't speak a lick of English. What if the job's like, I don't know, social speaking or something like that? What you gonna do? I don't know. Anyways, these unregulated algorithms can penalize competent applicants based on irrelevant information, like, I don't know, say adding your sport to a resume, like for team working or ethics. Real world consequences are caused from these bots. A Wall Street journalist talks about one man, Derek Mobley, and he had over 100 job applications. They were all rejected instantly. Why is that? Well, he talks about how he was automatically rejected because of his race, age, or his mental health. He sued this algorithm, and it actually proceeded in the lawsuit. That means that this is actually a real problem for America. This lawsuit with Derek Mobley highlights how these algorithms have transparent boxes that they just cross out for relevant information on qualified applicants. These bots look at something so small as like a gap in your jobs. What if you were taking care of a family member, or you were sick, or God forbid something happened, They don't care. They just see a year gap and they say, oh, declined. That's crazy, no? These algorithms are trained on historical data that are very biased. They favor men for leadership roles, and they penalize women for these things when they can be leaders too, These AI algorithms don't understand nuance or certain things that we humans can get, They simply reflect values and resumes with bias and historical data. Lack of legal requirements for accountability. Unlike other algorithms like used in healthcare or finance, these algorithms for hiring are used without any third-party audits, testing, or candidate appeals. The Washington Post had a journal speaking about how there are no federal laws requiring companies to explain how their AI algorithms work or whether they've been tested for bias. Some places like New York City or Colorado already started passing laws that fix this, but everywhere else around the world has still not adapted to this law and are still dealing with these unregulated hiring algorithms. Most employers are still not even required to disclose whether they can even use AI and explain why it rejects people. This leaves applicants in the dark and are confused on why they've been declined with no actual reason why. So my solution for this is implementing a strong regulation to keep hiring algorithms accountable, enforce mandatory bias audits, as well as transparency requirements. The government should require employers to conduct third-party audits on all hiring algorithms and publish it publicly. An example of this would be maybe New York City's law that was the very first in the U.S. to require bias audits for hiring algorithms. Expanding this law to a national level for all America and enforcing this law with penalties for not complying would promote transparency and reduce bias and discrimination. If we pass this federal legislation after the successful local efforts, a federal law on hiring algorithms could be drawn from recent efforts in Colorado's legislation with their consumer protection for AI in employment. This could take effect in 2026. This law requires employers to disclose when AI is used in employment decisions, as well as keep records, test for bias, and offer human review options for applicants. A national law similar to this would make it extremely easier to find a job and protect applicants from bias nationwide. The use of AI and hiring tools looks efficient to the naked eye, but without regulation, all it does is hurt qualified applicants through bias. We've seen how hiring algorithms will reject applicants without giving an explanation. They've trained on biased data without legal obligation. And we need to take steps like New York City and Colorado to introduce oversight. Imagine you send your resume to jobs and you're rejected isn't even from a human, but from a robot. A real person wouldn't even read your resume, and you have no idea why you're denied. This isn't just a flaw with AI. This is a whole civil rights issue, guys.